Hi, today we're going to talk about Baroque articulations, how to do your own, and a performance guide to the Bach E-flat Sonata first movement. In the Baroque era, composers would sometimes write articulations and sometimes not. So this is a guide to how to do your own articulations if you decide you want to do that. In the Baroque era, the acceptable patterns that came to light in the historically informed performance movement of the 80s, the hip movement, would be slur 4, slur 2, slur 2, tongue 4, tongue 1, slur 3, tongue 1. The biggest one that most people do that was not really appropriate was slur 2, tongue 2. That can be done at the beginning of a big group of 16th notes, but it's not frequently done. The other one that's not done so much is tongue 1, slur 2, or tongue 1, slur 2, tongue 1. So we're going to go through the Bach E-flat first movement, just looking at some of these patterns and how you would do those. A lot of it is, how does it feel to you? A word about the Bach E-flat Sonata. Bach wrote two different kinds of sonatas. The first was Flute and obbligato harpsichord sonata, which the E-flat sonata is one of those, meaning he wrote the obbligato in the right hand, and it's kind of like a duet with the flute. The other ones are the flute and basso continuo sonatas, where he would just write basically the bass, the right hand too, but it was more of chordal kind of sonata. So this one, if you wanted to, you could play a duet with your teacher and they could play the right hand of the keyboard. So anyway, looking at the Bach E-flat, the first part, looking at the articulations, you might have one that's urtext, U-R-T-E-X-T, that means there's no articulations written in. So it might look like this. Well, that's probably not how you're going to play it. So looking at this, it's kind of easy to get a feel for starting to try these articulations. So if you're looking at the first four notes, there's a note, then there's a huge leap. You usually are not going to slur huge leaps in the Baroque era. So I would tongue the B flat, and then you have three stepwise notes. So I'd probably slur those together. So it would sound like this. And that makes total sense, and it feels good. And then they're probably not going to tongue those really fast 30-second notes, so I'd probably slur those three together. So that feels good to me, and it sounds good too. And moving on after that, some parts may have a 16th note going to the B flat. This was interpreted as straight 16th notes in the Baroque era, just so you know. So those end up being straight 16th notes in measure 10. Now here you have several options because this is a stepwise pattern of 16th notes. You can do slur 4, you can do slur 2, you can do tongue 4, you can do tongue 1, slur 3, or slur 3, tongue 1. So here's an example of those. Any of those are acceptable. I kind of like the slur 3, tongue 1, so that's what I'm going to do. This is, you don't have to do it that way, you can do your own. So starting at the beginning. Now, this brings into another idea of the Baroque era. It's called an appoggiatura. A-P-P-O-G-G I-A-T-U-R-A. It's a dissonant note on a beat that resolves in the next note. So here where you have the A flat, that's a dissonant note, then it resolves to the G. So that's why I slurred the A flat to the G. So starting in measure 10. So I'd probably slur those two because it's dissonance, release, appoggiatura, release. And Bach is full of appoggiaturas, especially when you do trills. The trill should come from the upper note, which is the appoggiatura, and that's why trills in the Baroque era come from that upper note. It's kind of like you want that dissonance and then it releases. So going on here, since the next part is, it's kind of leapy a little bit, you've resolved the A flat. I think I would probably just tongue all of those, because if you slur the E flat D together, it doesn't really follow the rules. It feels okay. Sometimes you don't have to follow the rules. So that one's kind of up to you. So starting in measure 10. Now, when you have 2 eighth notes in a Baroque era, you kind of want to lean on the first one and come away from the second one, like you're doing raindrop, raindrop. So when you have the E flat C, so it's like strong, weak, strong, weak. Now going on to the next one, I would probably tongue the B flat and then slur the A flat G. You can do all tongued. Or I don't want it to be too busy, so I like to slur it. So then the next thing is an A flat trill, which you're going to start on the B flat because it's the appoggiatura. So I'm using B flat thumb, so it makes it real easy, and you're going to finger the A flat and wiggle this middle finger. So and I slurred those 2/16 notes and tongued the E flat. Okay, now moving on to the next measure. You have 4 eighth notes, and you have an octave B flat, and then you have successive thirds. So here you could elect to tongue all of those, or you could slur the last 3 because the last 3 fall into a pattern. Or you could do that, and then going on, you could do tongue 1, slur 3, or you could tongue them all again. Now the E flat, the long E flat to the D is another appoggiatura release, so I would slur that for sure. So going on, tongue these. Now you notice that I slurred the 2/16 notes. They're not really that important that you're going to tongue them, and you don't want all articulated notes. You want some slurred notes. So the faster notes I would slur. So here it goes again. Now I went on just a little bit so you can see what I was going to do. So in measure, I think that's measure 18, we have leap, 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 which I would tongue, and then you definitely have a third and then another third. So I would do slur 2 there, and that pattern keeps going on and on. There is a interval of a fourth in one of these, but it falls into the pattern. So here's what I would do starting in measure 18. So that's what I would do there. Now, going on in measure 19, where I just stopped, your accompaniment here, because the right hand of the keyboard has the pattern we just played on flute. This is where the duet obligato comes in. So you're going to be very, very light and soft. you take over again, so you can do whatever you want to well, not whatever you want to, but within reason in measure 20, you could tongue those three or you could slur the last two. So, starting in measure 21, you have a pattern here. You have 4/16 notes. So again, you could do slur 3, tongue 1, slur 3, slur 2, slur 2, tongue 4, or slur 4. And then you definitely have a slur 2 pattern in the second beat and the fourth beat. And I should mention beat 3 here. You can do one of two things in beat 3. You could do slur 3, tongue 1 because you have a note, a lower note, and back to that note. Or you could do tongue 1, slur 3 because those last three are scalar. D, E flat, F. So I'll do it both ways. Or, so here's measure 21. So that was one way to do it. Here's another way. Well, that was another way of doing beat 1. So beat 3 could be slur 3, tongue 1, or tongue 1, slur 3. But definitely beats 2 and 4, I would do slur 2, slur 2. So here's just a way to do it. So there's that little phrase right there. Now moving on, in beat 2, we could have, again, it's scalar 16th notes. You can do slur 3, tongue 1, slur 3, slur 4, tongue 4, or slur 2, slur 2. And then in beat 3 of measure 23, you have 3 notes going stepwise down, and then it goes back up. So you could do slur 3, tongue 1, or tongue 1, slur 3. So here's beat 3. Here's your two options. Or, so the measure can sound like, you have those options. So you can decide what fits you best. And then moving on to beat 4, you have one that's by itself, and then you definitely have 3 stepwise. So I would do tongue 1, slur 3. So here's the bar. There's that bar. You have many options you can do. I'm just kind of playing around with it and letting you get a feel for what to do here. So going on, anything that's repeated, obviously you can't slur. So I would probably slur that A to the B because you've got the dissonance, release, and then back to the B flat. Right there, you could do slur 2, slur 2. So you could do slur 2, slur 2 on that last beat, or you could just tongue them all. Now I should mention in measure 25, the first beat, you can do slur 3, tongue 1, or tongue 1, slur 3. I kind of like the tongue 1, slur 3. I don't know what, that's just me being particular. I don't know. But here's the two ways that would sound. Or, okay? So then, going on with that trill, make sure it's on the beat. You want the appoggiatura on the beat, which is the D above the C. So you're going to have D, another D for the trill, and it's first trill key. Make sure this is first trill key. In the other octave, it's second trill key, but in this octave, it's first trill key, and then the B flat. So, you play another D because it's the appoggiatura, and the trills always start from the appoggiatura in the Baroque era. Okay, going on, since you're probably now getting a feel for this, so it's kind of the same melody again. So I'm just going to play through a little bit of this for options for you. Very similar to the first statement. And that's very similar to the first statement again. Okay, so now it goes on to something else. Now there you have 4/16 notes that are stepwise again. So you have those 4 options, or 5 options I think it was, for the stepwise 16th notes. I chose slur 3 tongue 1. And then when you get to measure 40, take a breath between the 2 D flats, because the 8th note D flat is heading into the next succession of 16th notes. Now I did slur 2 there. That felt good to me. You could tongue them all. I was just breaking it up with some slurs. Now right there, I did slur 3 in measure 41. And then just to break it up on the second beat, I tongue them all. And then in the third beat, the C is by itself, and then the next 3 stepwise ones would be under a slur. Hopefully you caught most of that. It was the same patterns we've been talking about. So now we're going to start in measure 45. Measure 51, I break a little bit with tradition here because it's written possibly by C.P. Bach, so maybe he wasn't following strict rules of the Baroque era. If it was written by J.S. Bach, I don't know. I just kind of like this pattern. It kind of doesn't follow the rules, but that's the beauty of this. Maybe you can do your own thing sometimes. So here, it's kind of like you're playing a duet with yourself. Here's one voice. And here's the other voice. And here's the other voice. And here's the other voice. So that's where I kind of break the rules just a little bit, but I do like that. So make sure you bring out those 2 different voices. Now, in the next spot with the straight 8th notes, I love this phrase for interphrasing. And if you have successive 8th notes, this is a great way to make music. And especially with 4 of them, or 16th notes, anything, I think, and so to theirs. So you have a goal in mind. So here, now you notice I lengthen the 8th note before the 2 16th notes. That's kind of an unwritten rule in music, that you kind of lengthen an 8th note before 2 16th notes. If you just listen to performers, you'll hear that. But it's also the arrival point. So that's what you want to do there. So what did you notice in measure 59? that it's a tongue 1, slur 3 because you have a note by itself, then you have 3 stepwise notes. So that's going to be. Now in beats in 3 and 4, you have options here. You can do or, and then with the last beat, just to give it some more spice, I just tongue all 4 of them. So that bar. And that phrase is a mirror of the one that happened before. So when we get to this point where it's 2 eighth notes and it goes up to E flat, your accompaniment again. So you back off. So right here, I add a trill on the low D. Sometimes when appropriate, you can add that in the Baroque era. I added that trill on the next to last note. So there you have it. You can now do your own Baroque articulations.